So with the highly anticipated 28 Years Later movie now set to be released on June 20th, 2025, there have been many fans that have nearly waited 3 entire decades in seeing what was going to happen following the events of 28 Weeks Later, and now that we have official confirmation that both Danny Boyle and Alex Garland will be a part of this upcoming movie in what might be a trilogy moving forward, joining me right now to further tackle the subject of what might end up being 28 Years Later is my good friend and YouTuber known as Marcanine. Now Mark, me and you have talked about this off camera. I'm super excited for this as I'm really curious to see on how they're going to go as far as to evolve the Rage virus, if they're going to evolve the virus at all, and more importantly, hoping to establish grounds on what happened after the events of 28 Weeks Later, because it would really suck in my opinion if they just so happened to have glossed over that, because I do believe that the second outbreak for that specific movie was in fact very important. And so what I wanted to go on ahead and ask you, as well as everybody else watching this, to which you guys can let me know down in the comment section below, is how exactly will 28 Years Later set the precedent in having to introduce its narrative moving forward? Because I highly doubt that we're going to be kicking this entire new trilogy off by having everything be post-apocalyptic and simply just have the infected roam around, when in continuity we understand that they do have some type of a die-out rate. So if it truly has been 28 years later, then what I do believe that they need to do is set the precedent in order to get ready and gearing us up for a third outbreak, because if they go as far as to establish the overall narrative that the virus did go out and it spread throughout Europe, but it was ultimately contained, then who's to really say that remnants of the virus still isn't out there somewhere upon the world, in which either scientists have hold of it, or the military, or hell, perhaps even other wildlife, as we've seen in 28 Days Later. Based on that overall movie itself, we understand that at least monkeys are able to carry such a virus, including cats and dogs as well. So the way I do believe that we're going to be starting this off before the third major outbreak is going to be a moment of peace, or at least going back to remember the events of what had happened. Perhaps maybe you might have some conspiracy theorists that have denied the first 2 outbreaks, or even have the military try to cover it up somehow, because it has been a very long time. And so what I would like to know from you, Mark, as well as everybody else down in the comment section below, is with the way this entire project is rumored to go about, especially if there's going to be a trilogy, then how is it you think that 28 years later should end up kind of kicking off the beginning portions of the movie, in terms of going as far as to establish what had happened prior and even establishing bases as to what is currently going on? And are we bound to see somewhat of an evolutionary process behind the Rage virus, or do you think that more or less by the end of it, the Rage virus is going to remain the way it is, except this time go as far as to infect a much larger populace than how it was shown doing before?
There's a huge gap between days, weeks, months, years, whatever. 28 years later could mean anything, just because that's such a huge distance in time. That means that literally anything can happen. They could just throw us right in the middle of an apocalypse and say, over the past 28 years, this has happened. They could say, we've had multiple, pandemics and outbreaks, but we've since got it under containment, and whatever. I have no idea how exactly they're gonna move forward with the plot, because they haven't really talked about that much. But I do think there's a few things that we could probably expect, right? You're gonna see mutations of the virus, of course, because they're probably gonna try and do things that are a bit more extreme than the other 2 movies. Show different variants, show that there's a bigger threat than this sort of rabies adjacent Rage virus, which is basically what this is, or at least that's what I've always kind of depicted it as. Is it's rabies that infects humans. Rabies kills humans, but it doesn't have the same overall symptoms and impact as it would in a dog or a raccoon or something. When an animal gets rabies, it gets super angry, it goes off of basic instincts, it has this crazy fever and sense of fear and all these things. There is potential to see something similar, but we gotta see something new. We gotta see a different type of infection. We gotta see a different variant. Maybe they're using it for some sort of military thing, and they're using it, in some third world country that they're trying to take over or whatever. Or maybe they're using it in the Middle East so they can try and take over territory for oil. Or maybe they're doing science experiments and they're trying to find some cure to some other existing disease, and it breaks out. Or there's so many different ways. Because if I remember correctly, that's how 28 Days started, right? A monkey got it, and he, some liberation group was trying to free a bunch of caged animals, and a monkey bit a dude and he took it out in the world, and that's how it went down. So there's definitely a lot of potential. The problem is going from a 28 days its sequel and then 28 years, that's such a huge space and time that they could say so much happened in between. We have no idea where the world is at today. There's probably going to be, because it's not just an American thing, the entire world dealt with COVID. So I would be very surprised if they were going to do some sort of pandemic style infection movie, even if it has zombies and sci-fi horror aspects to it, without leaning into the recognition of some of the struggles that we as people across the globe struggled with. People in disbelief, people having different political opinions, and, you know, people getting it and dying. Some people, you know, being like, oh, this is all just, it's all fake, it's all a hoax, and whatever. Like, people disbelieving medical professionals. And that's essentially how things like that spread. Like, regardless of your personal beliefs on things, and everyone's, you know, entitled to their opinions, and I respect that and whatever, but it's like having so much disinformation across the world about an illness or a virus or something like that is the only way for things to get worse. And so I feel like they're probably going to do something like that in the movie. I don't know what hasn't been shown that I want to see, so I don't really have any idea specifically on like what they mean. I don't think anyone really knows except for the people making the movie. So it's going to be difficult to like really throw that out there. I do really think we're going to see a juxtaposition between like this fictional zombie-esque world and our own. I think what'll be interesting is because they're going to be focusing in London, or they're going to be, you know, across the pond, it's going to have a very different vibe to like a typical American pandemic perspective movie. Because I feel like if an American director was going to make this movie, I think America handled the pandemic things very differently than what other countries did. And like, and we can all say whatever we want about that, but like, we weren't there. During the pandemic, Americans weren't over in London, more or less, right? Americans as a whole, weren't necessarily overseas in another country dealing with it. We were all at home, we were all stuck, we were all dealing with it in our own way, good, bad, whatever. I gotta be honest, I don't remember there being like a flesh-eating aspect to this particular virus. It was more like humans that were infected, I feel like, turned into the most basic primitive of instincts. So that turned into flailing of the arms and random attacks, biting and all that. Like, it wasn't necessarily they wanted to eat you, I don't remember, but they did attack you via bite, and the bite is what was fatal, and that's what transferred the virus. So I don't remember necessarily them eating each other. But obviously that doesn't change really the fact of anything. Because like, in a zombie situation, what are you afraid of? Dealing with hordes, dealing with getting infected, dealing with getting bitten, you know? Like, yeah, of course, like, getting eaten alive is awful, but, like, if you're being attacked by a bunch of infected that are just biting the hell out of you and beating it, like, what's the difference? You know, like, you're gonna die in a matter of moments as they're chomping on you in your neck and ripping your throat out and everything. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, see, I think that they might end up doing that in terms of introducing somewhat of a pandemic-style zombie infection movie, to where if there is somewhat of a third major outbreak, whether it's done through a third party or through animals that are just roaming all around the continents, in which it goes on to spread throughout multiple different nations, then I think it would be a really cool retrospect to see what things would have been like in different parts of the world as well. But even then, what I want to know from you is, what are your overall expectations and what you think this is going to be like? Because I really highly doubt that they're going to be starting off this movie by going as far as to maybe introduce the elements of what had happened during the outbreak in France, and then carrying on from Paris, moving on to other different nations, you know what I mean? Because if it really has been 28 years later, which I'm really curious on why they didn't want to go with months instead, but I don't think that we're going to be starting this off by having to reintroduce the concept of what had happened prior, with the exception of it actually being over with, and kind of going as far as to adapt the elements of the first movie by introducing this idea that perhaps maybe the infected have died off, or the virus had maybe remained dormant somewhere. But either way, I want to know your best and worst case scenarios for this, because I do think that we're going to start this a little subtle until I'm already going to prognosticate and say that there is going to be a third major outbreak, to which that's when the ball is really going to get rolling.
I feel like it's just going to be a lot of comparisons. I feel like if they're going to be focusing on making the movie over in London, it's going to have a London influence. I think it's going to reflect a lot of what people over in England or in that part of Europe, I guarantee it, I'm calling it now, there's going to be some asshole who's going to be denying this whole thing. He's going to be either standing in front of the Senate, or he's going to have like some sort of online podcast. It's just going to be some dickhead who's going to say like it's all BS, it's not real, and then either he himself is going to get infected, like in a gnarly way, like his daughter or something like that is going to like rip his throat out, or he's going to like witness some loved ones or some other people or something like that getting completely thrashed to pieces by the infected. Either way, he's going to prove, like, he's going to experience something that proves that, hey, like, no, this infection's real. The only difference is that because this is 28 years later, I think that sort of encourages the false information aspect, because 28 days and 28 weeks later, that's enough time to where you have a mountain of evidence that, hey, this infection did happen, like this did take place. There's bodies and corpses and stuff like all around, the infected area. 28 years later is time for a whole new generation of people which means that there are people that are, you know, born like the day after 28 weeks later wrapped up, and now 28 years later they're, you know, in their mid to late 20s, presumably exactly 28, which means they weren't alive for when the outbreak occurred, which means it's very easy for them to be like, oh, this is BS, that's just a myth, that didn't happen, that's just political propaganda, they can say whatever. And I feel like that's going to be a really, really big part of it, and then the characters, whether they're major or minor, that say that are going to find out the hard way that it is indeed real, and they're going to be ripped apart, and I think that'll be interesting. Now, they're them doing a trilogy. I don't know exactly what sort of storyline with zombies like that you could do. Like I've never heard of that before. I have no idea how you could do like a trilogy of that. The only like horror franchise off the top of my head that has like a planned back-to-back trilogy was like The Strangers. I've never heard of a horror movie trilogy being shot like back-to-back. Maybe 2 movies, maybe, you know, an open-ended one and be like, okay, look, we have a possibility for 2, but like it's weird that they're just announcing like, hey, like this is happening, we've got the cast, we have a trilogy, and it's zombies. Like what do you do with that? I have no clue. I've never thought about it like that. I've never had like a fan fictional idea in my mind that I was like, this story is so big and so bold, it needs to be 3 movies. I have no idea what that means. That sounds nuts. And they also made a comparison that this is going to be like Lord of the Rings. That's even crazier if you think about it. Lord of the Rings was a massive cinematic achievement. And all the different cultural impacts that it had, like based off of some of the most critically acclaimed books from the most critically acclaimed writer of all time, like that's a wild and weird comparison to make. I have no idea how you do zombies on the same level as Lord of the Rings. I can't even begin to fathom that. But I do know that I'm excited about this. We've wanted this for a very long time. I thought 28 weeks later was fine. I didn't love it as much as 28 days later, but the potential for this is massive if they're going to do something fresh and special. But I think also considering that like these aren't your typical zombies where it's like a corpse walking around, as you pointed out, like they run, but also like they starve to death, like because this is more like a rabies thing. It's an infection that induces rage. You lose all sense of rationale and logic, and you just like go on the offensive and attack anyone and everything standing in your way. But like if all the humans are hiding away, you know, a human being can only go, you know, what, 20 some odd days before they die of starvation, which is what happened. And I think off the top of my head, I've seen 28 Days Later more recently, so no, that one was something that happened, as you saw like some of the infected just like dying on the hillside. You know, they haven't eaten in a long time, they're super duper skinny, whereas a corpse, it doesn't matter, they're not eating because they're hungry, it's just part of the infection. So this is a different set of circumstances, and I'm very curious as to what they do with it in a trilogy.
No, see, I'm curious too, because we're talking about the infected, we're talking about zombies, so this could really go in almost any other different direction to which we're actually talking about now. This could actually go into a direction where it's mainly involving the military, or perhaps maybe the virus had been extinct completely, had been eradicated without a trace, but maybe some super secret black funded organization out there, kind of sort of like Resident Evil in a way, went about their, you know, business to try to maybe create their own version of the virus and spread it, right? So this could really, really go in one of so many different directions, and I loved both 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later as well, so I really, 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 really do have high hopes for this movie. So let us know what you all think down in the comment section below. Do you guys believe that we're going to be opening up 28 years later, perhaps maybe following the events of what had happened during the second outbreak, or are we already going to be entering into this new trilogy with the virus being already extinguished, but there are some little components and remnants of it that are still left that are going to be used to create the third outbreak? So again, we want to thank you all so much for watching, everybody. Thank you all so much for your time, to which once more, if you also just so happen to be new to this channel, then I do encourage for you all to head on over and smash that subscribe button, on top of giving this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below. Tune back in for more, and with all that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Mark, so much for joining me, and we'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy, guys, and have a great day. Peace!